I am King Gustav Adolf, the Lion of the North and the savior of Protestantism. Born in Stockholm on the 9th day of December in 1594, as the first son of Charles IX, King of Sweden, and Christina of Holstein-Gottorp. I rose to the Swedish throne in 1611 when I was 17, inheriting 3 conflicts: the Kalmar War with Denmark, hostilities with Russia, and the intermittent Polish-Swedish War between me and my cousin Sigismund. My first test came against Denmark during the Kalmar War, which broke out in 1611 and ended inconclusively in 1613, though the peace secured Sweden's independence. After that, I turned my gaze eastward, resolving the Ingrian War with Russia through the Treaty of Stolbovo in 1617. This victory secured vital territories, including Karelia and Ingria, cutting Russia off from the Baltic Sea. It was a triumph that announced Sweden's emergence as a Baltic power. Poland, however, would prove a persistent rival. For decades, we clashed in the Polish-Swedish War from 1617 to 1629, fighting over Livonia and Baltic dominance. By the Treaty of Altmark in 1629, Sweden gained control of important Baltic ports, solidifying our naval power. My greatest challenge, however, came with the 30 Years' War, a bloody conflict that tore apart the Holy Roman Empire. It was a war of faith, with Protestant states fighting for survival against the Catholic Habsburgs. In 1630, I landed in Germany with a well-trained army, determined to tip the scales in favor of the Protestant cause. At Breitenfeld, I shattered the myth of Catholic invincibility, earning the respect of allies and adversaries alike. My innovative tactics, emphasizing mobility, combined arms, and decentralized command, set a new standard in military art. What is a man's worth if not measured by the legacy he leaves behind? My reign transformed Sweden into a great power. My reforms modernized the army, establishing Sweden as a military innovator. My governance strengthened the state, with administrative reforms laying the groundwork for a centralized, efficient kingdom. Yet, my contributions extend beyond the sword and the throne. I championed education, founding Uppsala University, and fostering a culture of learning. I balanced the pursuit of glory with the welfare of my subjects, leaving behind a Sweden more united and prosperous than I found it. The Swedish Empire flourished for decades after me, and my daughter Christina took the throne and continued the work I began. To some, I am a warrior king. To others, a defender of faith.
The reign of Gustavus Adolphus from 1611 to 1632 marked the golden age of the Swedish Empire. Known as the Lion of the North and a champion of Protestantism during the 30 Years' War, Gustavus transformed Sweden into a European great power through a combination of military innovation, strategic diplomacy, and administrative reforms. His reign saw Sweden rise as a dominant force in Northern and Central Europe, with a string of military victories and territorial expansions. When Gustavus Adolphus ascended to the throne in 1611, Sweden was in a precarious position. It was engaged in multiple conflicts: the Kalmar War with Denmark-Norway, hostilities with Poland, and the ongoing Ingrian War with Russia. Additionally, Sweden was not yet the military powerhouse it would become, and its economy relied heavily on its natural resources, such as iron and copper. Through reforms, vision, and exceptional leadership, Gustavus Adolphus not only overcame these challenges, but elevated Sweden to the status of a great power. The Kalmar War began during the reign of Gustavus's father, Charles IX, and continued into Gustavus's early years as king. The conflict was fought against Denmark-Norway, which sought to block Sweden's access to the North Sea and control trade routes. The war ended inconclusively with the Treaty of Naird in 1613. Sweden ceded territory, but retained the crucial port of Gothenburg, maintaining access to the North Sea. This marked a symbolic victory, as Sweden preserved its independence and potential for expansion. Ingrian War from 1610 to 1617 was part of a broader conflict between Sweden and Russia, aimed at securing control of the eastern Baltic region. Gustavus Adolphus inherited the conflict and pursued it aggressively. In 1617, the war concluded with the Treaty of Stolbovo, which was highly favorable to Sweden. Russia ceded Ingria and Kexholm, cutting off its access to the Baltic Sea. This victory solidified Sweden's hold over the eastern Baltic and weakened Russia's influence in the region. The Swedish-Polish War was a defining conflict in the reign of Gustavus Adolphus, rooted in political, territorial, and personal rivalries. At its heart was the Baltic Sea, where Sweden and Poland vied for control over lucrative trade routes and influence. On a personal level, it was also a confrontation between Gustavus Adolphus and his cousin, Sigismund III Vasa, King of Poland, who had been deposed from the Swedish throne due to his Catholic faith and opposition to Protestantism. This war not only demonstrated Gustavus Adolphus's military genius, but also laid the groundwork for Sweden's emergence as the dominant power in the Baltic region. Dynastic rivalry were in the depth of this conflict, as Sigismund III Vasa was King of Sweden throughout the years 1592 to 1599, before being deposed by the Swedish nobility in favor of his Protestant uncle, Charles IX, Gustavus Adolphus's father. Sigismund never relinquished his claim to the Swedish throne, creating a bitter family rivalry. The war officially began in 1626, when Gustavus Adolphus launched an invasion of Polish-controlled Prussia, modern-day northern Poland. This campaign would showcase his revolutionary military tactics and strategies. Gustavus landed his army on the coast of Royal Prussia, capturing key towns such as Plough and Elbing. His primary objective was to seize control of Danzig Gdansk, a major port city crucial to Baltic trade. However, Danzig's defenses and Polish resistance prevented its immediate capture. Early in the campaign, the Swedes secured a notable victory at Wallhof, where Gustavus demonstrated the effectiveness of his disciplined infantry and mobile artillery. The Swedish forces inflicted heavy losses on the Polish army and cemented their control over parts of Livonia and Prussia. Gustavus faced Hetman Stanislaw Koniec-Polski, one of Poland's most skilled commanders, in an inconclusive battle near Dershol, Tksul. Gustavus himself was wounded during the battle, temporarily halting his campaign. Despite this, the Swedish forces retained their territorial gains. The war also extended to the Baltic Sea, where the Polish navy scored a rare victory over the Swedes at the Battle of Oliwa, capturing a Swedish flagship. However, this success did little to change the overall course of the war, as Sweden's dominance at sea remained largely unchallenged. The Swedish-Polish War had far-reaching consequences for both Sweden and Poland. The territorial and economic gains from the war strengthened Sweden's position as a Baltic superpower. Control of Baltic trade routes funded Sweden's entry into the 30 Years' War, where Gustavus would further solidify his legacy. On the other hand, the war weakened Poland's control over its northern territories and marked the beginning of its long-term decline as a major European power. Sigismund's ambitions to reclaim the Swedish throne were permanently thwarted. The resources and experience gained during the Swedish-Polish War directly contributed to Gustavus's success in battles like Breitenfeld during the 30 Years' War, furthering the Protestant cause in Europe.